Hey guys, Steve02 here, back with another episode of my TARDIS tutorial. You might notice my TARDIS is looking a little bit different. It has a little 1 right there. Yeah, that's because this isn't technically my TARDIS, not the one you're used to. But we also have something even weirder, another TARDIS, TARDIS number 2. Yes. So what I'm showing off now today is how to make there be able to be 2 TARDISes in your world, and even if there's only one TARDIS, this video will be useful for if you're playing on multiplayer. So if there's one TARDIS, or whether there are 2 TARDISes, either way, in multiplayer it can be kind of buggy because certain commands would target, say, like @P, the nearest player, and the nearest player could be you or your friend, and you could run into some problems if you're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and trust me, that happens a lot more than you'd think. Several features of my TARDIS just end up going very, very wrong if there are 2 players getting in the way of one another. So, what I've devised is a system where you could have 1 TARDIS and 2 players, or 2 players with their own TARDISes, or as many as you want. You could have as many players, as many TARDISes. If you had a ton of TARDISes, that would get very laggy, but you get the point. So right now, I've just made a new world where I've made these 2 TARDISes, and they both work, but I haven't coded in every function, only like 2 or 3 for now, because pretty much most of this is just a case of me explaining to you how to implement them, and I don't really need to show you, because otherwise, other than a few small things that are exactly the same, most of the features as in my other videos. But feel free to ask any questions if you still need help, even after this video. So let's begin. So I'll show you this. So I have 2 TARDIS keys. They don't have to be made from different items, but they do definitely need different names. So one is TARDIS key 1, goes to this TARDIS. This one is TARDIS key 2, goes to this TARDIS. And as you can see, if we tried TARDIS key 2 on TARDIS number 1, absolutely nothing happens. Same thing if we use TARDIS key 1 on number 2, but if we use number 2 on number 2, we are sent inside. And that system is exactly the same as my normal system, except obviously we have 1 for each of these TARDIS interiors, which are near identical. Point being, we have execute if entity has the iron nugget in their offhand with the name TARDIS key 2, then it will teleport that player executing at TARDIS number 2, the IP at this distance, to these coordinates of this door. And it's exactly the same for the other TARDIS, except obviously for, where is it? Okay, point is, for TARDIS key number 1, and in this command block we're executing at TARDIS number 1, teleporting the nearest player to that TARDIS to this pressure plate here. So yeah, basically you just need to specify which TARDIS you're talking about and what interior coordinates, and that's basically how you get the TARDIS key to work for either of those. And because of I thought it wasn't really necessary to specify anything on the @P. So for most of these commands, you're probably going to need to change @P to an actual player's name, because otherwise it'll just target the nearest player. But you could just have the TARDIS only work for specific players, depending on whose TARDIS it is. But for this one, this command, the key, it's not really needed, because the player needs to be at a distance of only like 2 blocks close to the TARDIS anyway to get it to work, obviously. So yeah, basically if I'm using this and I'm here, it won't work. So yeah, basically the point is, don't let other players probably even get a hold of your TARDIS key. It doesn't really matter if they do, because they can't get in unless they get close to it like this. But point is, only the player who is holding the key and is within those 2 blocks of the TARDIS is going to get teleported in. And again, the key what key it is will determine what TARDIS it is. So there's your distinction in that regard. These three command blocks right here are just the basic Chameleon Circuit. It's only the one exterior for each of these TARDISes. Again, the Chameleon Circuit is exactly the same, basically zero changes, I don't think, on this one. For either of the TARDISes, it's the same thing, just executing at a specific TARDIS, summoning some falling blocks. Same here, except this one is TARDIS 1. So the Chameleon Circuit's basically exactly the same, even if you coded in the big, like, one with the big cycle thing. Basically, if you did that one, just make sure all the armor stands are named something different. It's basically that same deal with the two TARDISes carries over to any armor stand or entity that you use in these systems. If any system uses any sort of entity, armor stands or pigs in the case of the Reaper attack, anything like that, just make sure all of those have different names from each other depending on which TARDIS they correspond to, just so that the command blocks can target those specific entities for that specific TARDIS. And the final thing I've coded in for this TARDIS is dematerialization, so executing if the lever is pulled, what it'll do is change the data of TARDIS 2 to TARDIS Demat 2, and then also say TARDIS 2 dematerialized. So again, this is exactly the same as normal, just specifying which specific TARDIS you are talking about. And same for when you click off the lever. We'll say it's rematerialized and set Demat 2 back to TARDIS 2. Same thing with TARDIS 1, it's just simply testing for a different lever and naming it with a 1 on the end, basically. So yeah, this is all I've coded in, because everything else pretty much follows a similar principle. Just specify which TARDIS you're talking about, and most of the time also which player you were talking about in the commands. So I'm just going to run through a lot of the commands where those would be important. So traveling to different locations should probably be fine. Obviously, like I said, if you're using the system with the cycles, again, rename the armor stands to be distinct for each one with numbers or whatever you choose. Time travel, exactly the same. Most of this is fine. The control labels and tooltips, make those different for each TARDIS. Again, probably just number them, because all those entities, all those armor stands underneath the console are each going to need to be targeted individually. Long distance travel should be fine. Sounds should be fine. Just specify again which player and which TARDIS you want to play the sounds. Door lock, again, specify. TARDIS flight, the manual flight, that's a bit of a tough one. There's so many commands in that one. Targeting, specific player, specific TARDIS. Just make sure all of them correspond to the correct player and the correct TARDIS. Replace any @Ps with specific. Replace any @Ps with specific player names. Replace anything that just says @ename equals TARDIS to TARDIS 1 or TARDIS 2. The exterior view monitor, basically exactly the same deal. Just specify which TARDIS you are teleporting the player to, which player you are teleporting and changing into spectator mode and whatnot. The Statenheim remote, again, exactly the same deal. Specify 2 separate items with different names for different players, and specify which TARDIS is going to be teleported by those and to whom it's going to be teleported. Pretty much everything else is just as simple as just telling you, just pay attention no matter what to which player and which TARDIS the commands refer to, and obviously make them each distinct. That's the basic gist of basically everything I've been saying this episode, and yeah, a lot of the commands are going to be very easy to figure out if you just follow those basic rules. And yeah, so a multiplayer compatible TARDIS, fantastic. I am glad that I've made this, because I tried to go on my other world with a friend of mine, and I think he tried to do the manual flight, and yeah, the TARDIS kind of got a bit screwed up. Like, one of us was sent outside to fly around, but the other one had the, like the falling blocks around them, and then the TARDIS key, when held to try to go back to the interior, would teleport whoever was nearer to the interior, which was the other one who wasn't teleported outside. So yeah, point is, if you do not specify specifically a player that you're talking to or about in a command and what TARDIS you're talking about, stuff can get messy. So yeah, just follow those basic set of rules and you should be perfect for a multiplayer compatible TARDIS. So yeah, I have been Tibo2. This has been my episode on a multiplayer compatible TARDIS. Let me know again if you have any specific questions about this. But overall, like I said, it's simple, just specify things and you should be fine, theoretically. But yeah, that is all. Be sure to subscribe, to follow my Instagram, Tibo2YT, and I will see you all in the next episode. Goodbye.